Goodness me. Okay, sorry, yeah, we're ready now. All right, so I'm here with Jasmine, and she is going to tell us her name, age, and a little bit about herself and where she's from to start.
So my name's Jasmine Lister. I am 32 and I am from Devon.
Lovely. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you work, etc.?
Yep. So I currently work as a healthcare assistant on a neonatal unit in Musgrove Hospital in Taunton.
And you're married or with a partner?
So I am married. I've been with my husband since I was 13. So we've been together 18 years. So we're childhood sweethearts, as some would say.
Oh, that's a lovely story. I like those. And whose story are you sharing today, Jasmine?
Today I'll be sharing my son's story, Rhodi.
And why do you want to share his story with us today?
I think it's really important to share Rhodi's story just to spread the awareness of Group B Strep, as it's become quite apparent that there's just not enough information out there for expecting mums already, because I'm already a mum to a little girl called Dolly who's 3, and it's something that I'd never heard of until I was told that Rhodi had Group B Strep when he was fighting for his life in hospital.
And in your own words, can you please tell us about your pregnancy and birth with Rhodi?
So during my pregnancy with Rhodi, I had a really healthy pregnancy. All my appointments were brilliant. They measured him as quite a big baby, and thankfully he didn't come out toddler size. He came out a good 7 pound 8 ounces. But I had a really healthy pregnancy.
Lovely. And in your own words, can you please share what happened when you went into labour and were giving birth to Rhodi, please?
So I went into hospital on Friday the 5th of January this year. I went in to be induced because I'd gone over by a week, and as they were expecting him to be quite large, it was quite important that I was induced. So I went in on the Friday and had the pessary, which didn't work. So we had to wait a certain amount of time before they took me over to labour ward to break my waters and pop me on a drip. And whilst they'd done that, they gave me the epidural to block out any pain, because no mum likes feeling pain. And I'm quite the wimp for that. So the epidural was my best friend.
Absolutely. And what happened next?
So during labour, everything was going fine. I was examined quite a couple of times where I was dilating as I should. When it came to the pushing stage, so I was 10 centimetres, whilst pushing, Rhodi's heart rate became elevated. And during that, they had to do an ultrasound to see what was happening as to why he wasn't coming out of the birth canal as he should. And it turned out he was coming down sideways. So they then decided to get one of the consultants in. Sorry. They got the consultant in to say, actually, it's best we take you down to theatre. And what we're going to do is try and turn him and then use forceps. And if that didn't work, we had to go down to have a C-section. Thankfully, when they took me over to the theatre, they managed to turn him, and I had a forceps delivery, and he was delivered absolutely perfectly.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. And what happened after that once he was delivered?
So once Rhodi had been born, we went back to the labour suite, and we're obviously in our little bundle of happiness with Rhodi. We FaceTimed our daughter, who was ecstatic that she was now a big sister. And I was taken over to the postnatal ward, where I spent the evening, because Rhodi was born at 4:30 in the afternoon. So I sort of spent the evening there with my husband, who then left to go look after our daughter. He had to have checks during the night, which I don't feel were completed correctly, which I've raised with the hospital. And then we were discharged home the following day after he had his neonatal screening test.
Okay. And at that time, nothing appeared wrong.
No, so I obviously raised concerns initially because he had a high heart rate during labour,
Mhm.
and he was also born with meconium. So there was quite a few red flags for me because of the nature of my job working on the neonatal unit.
Yeah.
I kind of know some things, which makes it a little bit harder to have a baby because you know little things to look out for. However, I trusted that the healthcare professionals, as you should, and they discharged us home, which Dolly and Scott came to get me from the hospital. And Dolly was absolutely besotted with her baby brother, speechless. And for my 3-year-old, that's pretty rare. But no, we came home on the Monday.
Okay, lovely. And then what happened after that in terms of when did you first start noticing that something was wrong or suspecting something may be wrong in terms of signs or?
So during the week, we had numerous appointments at our local hospital, where I did question about his feeding because I didn't think he was feeding properly. To which they just sort of said, you know, he is a new baby. Sometimes they do struggle. So I had some support with feeding. We then had our check on the Sunday. So during Rhodi's night feeds at 5 o'clock in the morning on the Sunday, he was quite unsettled, which was really unlike him because he's quite a calm, chilled, content little boy. And he didn't prior to that, like after that, he didn't feed. So 8:30 came, and I tried feeding him a breast and bottle. He didn't want either, so I let it go like an hour. So he went up to like 4 hours without a feed. Again, I tried everything to sort of like get him wanting a feed. He was awake at times, and responsive, but not as he normally would because he'd normally want a feed. So I rang my local hospital as I had an appointment with them that day and just asked if I could get in any earlier. To which they said no, sorry. So I explained my concerns and was kind of told, just come in at your normal appointment. Again, I sort of said to them, actually, he's not feeding, like that's not normal for him. Again, put my trust in the medical professionals and listened to them and attended my appointment as I should. And when I arrived, when I was sat in the waiting room, I noticed that Rhodi had started grunting. So I took a video on my phone, just so I could show them because he wasn't doing it all the time. It was sort of in and out. So when we sat in with the midwife, I sort of said, actually, something's not right. Like, you know your baby, you know something's not okay. And I was kind of shrugged off, like, we're the professionals, we know that everything looks okay. So I showed them the video of him grunting, to which they then questioned a little bit. So they listened into his heart rate. The midwife then went out and made a call. And when she came back in, she asked me to get him undressed to put him on the scales to weigh him, to which I then noticed he had mottled skin. So these for me were like massive red flags. He had mottled skin, he was grunting, and he wasn't feeding properly. So at that point, they just sort of said to me, actually, we're going to send you to your the hospital up the road, which is the bigger hospital, to go to A&E to get him checked over. So as we were leaving, I knew something wasn't right. You guess a mother's instinct. However, if they sent us home, it was said that if they sent us home, he would have had a cardiac arrest at home and died. Thankfully, he didn't, because that would have been an even more traumatic experience than what we've already been through. So we got to A&E, we went to check in, and someone was waiting for us, which, as we all know, when you get to A&E, you tend to wait a long time. So they took us round, we sat on the bed, they took us temperature, and with that, we were straight round to resus. And there was 3-4 people, consultants in there, trying to get a cannula in him. To which Rhodi wasn't flinching. He wasn't showing any signs of pain, which for me was another big red flag, because he should be crying. They're trying to cannulate him. Most babies cry when they're cannulated. And when they were talking amongst themselves in the corner, they talked about intubating a baby, not knowing that I'm in a job where I know exactly what that means. So I just kind of said to them, look, you need to be talking to us because we're his parents. So they just sort of said, actually, we need to intubate him to be able to stabilize him. So they asked us to leave the room. So we were gone for 10 minutes whilst they intubated him. And when we came back in, there was a group of 10 consultants working on trying to stabilize his blood pressure. I was then asked, are you a carrier of Group B Strep? I was like, not that I'm aware of. I haven't been tested for it. It's not something that I'm aware that I carry. At that point, they had swabbed Rhodi for Group B Strep, and you could see the sheer panic in their faces, which kind of made me and Scott quite unsettled, is because we knew something was really wrong. And then they advised us that they had to be sent to Bristol intensive care unit, children's intensive care unit. So it was then obviously early hours Monday morning. We arrived in Bristol by ambulance at 3 a.m. Where they then had to set him up on all his medication, the machines. So we then had to sit and wait until the consultant came in the next morning, and she came and told me that actually Rhodi has tested positive for Group B Strep. They then spoke to us about the seizure activity that he was having, which we didn't even know he was having seizures until they sort of like pointed out the machine, pointed out the spikes in the machine as to when he was having a seizure and when he wasn't. Our consultant was very good. She sort of talked us through everything, and she gave it us in layman's terms, so we understood what she was talking about rather than the medical jargon. I'm not sure how you say it. However they talk in their
jargon.
words. That's the one. So it got to the point where they asked to take him for another CT scan. He had already received one in Exeter, which they were showing no damage to the brain at that point. They took him for another one, and the consultant on the night shift sort of said, like, if there is something, if I see something, I will let you know. However, the pediatric neurology team had to review the scans to give us a bigger picture. So once Rhodi was back from the CT, the consultant and another nurse started walking towards me and Scott. It was 12 at night at this point. And you can kind of tell by the faces of medical professionals that something wasn't right. And they asked to take us to a side room, to which me and Scott, the little hope that we had left, it was a bit like, you're taking us to a side room, 12 o'clock at night, the ward's empty, there's no one here. So we went to the side room with them, and they told us that actually, although they couldn't completely say it because it's got to be said by the neurology team, however, he had extensive amount of brain damage due to the infections caused. So they then moved us to a side room with Rhodi and asked like what our plan of action would be next. So when our consultant come on the day round, she said that she spoke to a neurology team, and their words were, Rhodi has unsurvivable brain damage. So he had the Group B Strep, which then he had meningitis on the brain, which caused the unsurvivable brain damage. So then we had to make the choice as to whether we wanted to continue Rhodi's care and have a child, which we wouldn't know his life expectancy. We wouldn't know, there's a good chance he wouldn't have been able to walk, talk, eat. He would never be able to ride a bike. He would never have a normal group of friends.
Take the time.
So for myself, Scott and Dolly, the kindest thing to do was obviously to let him pass away on his own. So on the Tuesday evening, we had all our friends and family come and meet Rhodi, because no one had met him yet, because we wanted that week on our own as a family. So a lot of people's first hellos were their goodbyes, which for a lot of people was really hard. But we also wanted to give everyone that opportunity because we were proud of Rhodi. Like, he was a beautiful little boy. And then on the Wednesday, we decided that was the day that we were going to take him off of his life support. So we had our daughter come in. So Dolly came in and she done handprints with him. She helped me give him a bath. So we made lots of core memories together with him. And then obviously I had to explain, actually, like, she refers to him as baby brother. Baby brother's really poorly. He's got to go to heaven. To which she then started having a little meltdown. I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to send him to heaven. Well, darling, it's not our choice. He's really poorly. But having to explain to a 3-year-old that went through a pregnancy with you, that was on when I was on my bouncy ball, she was on a football next to me trying to bounce out baby brother. So explaining that to her was immensely difficult. She then went home with her nan whilst me and Scott stayed in hospital, and they withdrew his life support at 6 o'clock, and Rhodi passed away at 6:30 on the Wednesday, the 17th of January.
Thank you very much for that, Jasmine. Do you need a little break?
Yes, please.
That's a lot. Yeah. No, of course, that is a lot to relive, a lot to tell me. And, you know, thank you for that. It was very moving. Particularly obviously the parts about Dolly. That's just, I mean, that's terribly heartbreaking to hear, because she was so looking
and even today, like the other night, she sat with her little, she has choices to read books in the evening, and she's got a photo book with Rhodi, and that was the book she chose to have a look at that night. So she sits and looks through the pictures, talks about him, talks about the tube in his mouth still, and how he's gone up to heaven. Is he ever going to come back down? Is she ever going to see him again? So it's you need to tell her that he's died, because I don't want to say he's gone away or he's gone to sleep, because actually that's not fair. Like, actually he died. I don't want her ever thinking he's going to come back, because that's not going to be the case.
And yeah, and you have to make sure that they're aware it is the finality, because otherwise that's that hope, and that you're right, that isn't fair on the child, of course. So can you just explain, I know you obviously it's quite clear, but how, like, sort of what has happened since, and how's your life and that of your family been impacted by this loss?
So after losing Rhodi, I mean, getting by day to day, we're really lucky that we've got Dolly to sort of keep us going, because actually she's the reason we get out of bed in the morning. She's the reason we still go to work. She is our reason. We do little things to keep Rhodi's memory alive. So we brought a plant, which is the rhododendron plant, which Dolly takes pride in watering every single night. But trying to navigate a life when you should have a child. So obviously I've been on maternity leave, and for me, like, I'm so desperate to go back to work, but I work in a neonatal unit. So the fine line of going back to work with poorly babies after losing my baby is quite difficult itself, because you work alongside parents who have all got poorly babies, and you don't want to put the fear of life into them as to why you've been off work. So I don't want Rhodi's memory to not be there, but it's something that I can't necessarily share without terrifying other people.
And also that's must be very upsetting for you as well, to have to sort of give that reason every time, when you obviously, I'm sure, just want to say I'm on maternity leave, but then that leads to questions about, oh, what did you have? And then it's sort of those unavoidable, and people mean well, but it's so difficult. So no, that's completely understandable. Just getting into more about your awareness of group B strep. Did you have any awareness before you had Rhodi or during your pregnancy?
No, and obviously I had a healthy pregnancy with Dolly, and touch wood, Dolly's all okay. The only time I heard about group B strep was when they asked me about it at the hospital, if I was a carrier, and I was like, I've got no idea what that is. And when they said he tested positive, obviously at that point I was like, okay, let's get on the internet, let's research. But other than that, I'd not been told about it. I've not been told when. It's all well and good people packing you with leaflets in the hospital, but 9 times out of 10 you don't go through those leaflets unless someone goes through them with you to say, actually, let's talk about what the signs and symptoms are of this XYZ. So I wouldn't have known about it. And myself, I've been raising awareness for group B strep, and the amount of parents that have come to me saying, actually, Jazz, you saved my baby because you told us Rhodi's story, and because you shared Rhodi's story, I got tested and I tested positive, so I had antibiotics in labour. And you kind of think, I lost my child, I wouldn't want anyone to ever have to go through that. So the fact that Rhodi was able to save other children, it gives me some sort of peace in the fact that he's able to do that. But I shouldn't have had to lose my child in order for that to happen.
No, of course not. And I'm glad you can take comfort from that, but I'm sure on some certain days it seems like scant comfort for what you're dealing with.
Sure.
Obviously, Rhodi had late onset group B strep.
Yeah.
Not only were you not aware of group B strep, you weren't aware that it could cause late onset infection or what to look for?
I had no idea. I didn't. And the only reason I questioned at the hospital was because he was grunting and had mottled skin. But if I didn't work on a neonatal unit where that sort of stuff is discussed, I wouldn't have even brought that up. I would have had no idea at all I wouldn't have even mentioned it because I wouldn't have known. Because babies make weird noises sometimes, but this was a grunt rather than a, God, that was a bit too much milk, but some parents wouldn't even know to even think, actually, that's a really big sign.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you like to see sort of happen in terms of raising awareness for GBS and giving, having parents be aware and having them know that they've got options and keeping them informed?
I think routinely screening needs to be done. I know with group B strep, it can come and go. However, if you're screened at 36 weeks and you test positive, that should just be okay, you still have antibiotics in labour despite if you test negative again. I think routine screening needs to happen because actually that's what saved a number of lives of people that I now know, because when I've said, actually, just try and make sure you get screened. And it actually, for me, I know I've had a lot of friends and family that are pregnant at the same time as me, and that have all had their babies, and it's put the fear of life into them. They should be enjoying this experience as a mum, and actually they're terrified because of what's happened to Rhodi and what could have been prevented.
So this is the other thing that we like to get across. It doesn't just affect one family, it really is that ripple effect that it's affected your family. Absolutely. On a wider level, and also, as you say, pregnant relatives and friends. I mean, that pretty much covers all of our questions, but I just wondered if there's anything additional you'd like to say about sort of Awareness Month and what you'd advise people to do and the work you've been doing to sort of, raise awareness and give people that understanding.
It's a hard one because I just think that actually at your prenatal appointments, it should be discussed. Like, it wasn't discussed with me at any of my appointments during Dolly's pregnancy, Rhodi's pregnancy. And if I go on to have another, I'd like to see if it's discussed then or not, to see whether it's still the same despite losing a child over it. But I think it should be something that is discussed at any point during your pregnancy, actually, what to look out for. And it should be a case of, I don't know, your 16-week check, and they say, actually, this is group B strep, this is the causes. Don't want to scare you. However, it's really important that you're made aware of it. And people should be screened, every person in England, because they screen everywhere else in the world. So I don't understand why England isn't doing the same. It's frustrating.
It is. And I can assure you, share your frustration and are taking lots of steps and doing campaigns such as this and with people such as yourself to, raise that level of awareness and try and lobby the politicians and everything else to change that. So
I honestly can't understand it. Even if in Wales, people get to opt out of being screened. That's fine. If you want to opt out, but actually you should be given an option. You shouldn't have to pay £40 to be privately screened for it. That shouldn't be the case. Makes me angry.
Yeah, I can completely understand. Absolutely. I also, just my last question really is, how is this sort of, obviously being so fresh, how is it continuing to impact on your mental health and that of your husband, your relationship, if you feel comfortable sharing? Because obviously it's not just
of
a
course.
one and done.
No, so I'm really lucky in that me and Scott have got really good communication. So we will talk about things. We will talk about Rhodi. We often discuss like what happened with him. So we're quite lucky that we've got each other to be able to bounce off of. But I now see my clinical psychologist at work to discuss Rhodi's death, trying to get back into a job which is so near to what's happened. And family, like I've had to arrange counselling for my family because they struggle with the fact that they've lost, particularly my mum and dad, that they've lost their grandchild, as well as grieving for their daughter who's also lost a child. It just changes your life. There's sort of, everyone says like time's a healer, but I don't think, it's just, you deal with grief in different ways. And like I said, me and Scott are really blessed to have Dolly, because she is the reason that you keep going and you have to get out of bed in the mornings. Else I honestly don't know where me and Scott would be now if we didn't have her. I couldn't imagine losing my first child and then having to even think about life after that.
And just finally, what would you like other expectant parents to know about Group B Strep? And
even if you don't have symptoms, just say you have so you can get tested for it.
I don't think you don't get symptoms of it when you're a carrier. When you're pregnant, you don't have symptoms of it.
They say if you've got thrush, that's the, if I went to the midwife and was pregnant and said I've got thrush, they would test me for Group B Strep at that point.
Okay, interesting. I'll have to speak to my colleague about that because I'm not 100%
when I spoke to my fine. When I spoke to my midwife, who was there for Rhodi, luckily she wasn't there during the bad times, so she's someone that I've still got quite a good rapport with. And she said, like, when parents come in and they say they've got thrush, that's normally their go-to as to testing them for Group B Strep.
Okay, so as in the NHS in the hospital.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Otherwise, you've got to pay £40 for a private test.
Yes. Yes. Anything else you would like to add before we finish?
No, other than if you guys need help with anything, like, I'm more than happy to raise awareness and do whatever I need to do to save the other parents the heartache that we've been through.
All right, thank you.